Waitress speaks Japanese to mysterious customer. Next day, she's called by the restaurant owner. Emily Chen was wiping down the restaurant tables when she felt all eyes turn toward the entrance. A well-dressed man in an impeccable blue suit and perfectly combed hair chose a table in the most secluded corner of the dining room. "Excuse me, water please," he said in perfect Japanese without even looking at her. Silence fell over the room. Emily felt her heart race. It had been years since she'd heard her native language spoken so naturally. "Yes, I'll bring it right away," she replied automatically, promising to bring water immediately. The man looked up and stared at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. There was something familiar about his face, the way he observed her, as if seeing a ghost. The other customers whispered among themselves. No one expected the 24-year-old waitress, who had worked there for 2 years, to speak fluent Japanese. She had always been discreet about her origins, keeping her personal history to herself. "What is your name?" the customer asked. "I'm Emily," she replied, her hands trembling slightly. The man closed his eyes for a moment, as if the name caused him physical pain. When he opened them again, Emily saw tears forming. "I'm sorry," he murmured in Japanese before abruptly standing up. He left $500 on the table without even ordering food and walked out, leaving Emily completely bewildered. The other staff gathered around her, curious about what had happened, but she couldn't explain. That night, Emily barely slept. There was something in the man's voice, the way he said her name, that stirred long-buried memories, fragmented recollections of a childhood she'd rather forget. The next morning, as soon as she arrived at work, Mr. David, the restaurant owner, called her into his office with an urgency she'd never seen before. "Emily, I need to talk to you about yesterday's customer," he said, his hands slightly shaking. "Do you know him?" she asked, a chill settling in her stomach. David Parker was 58 and had always been a fair but distant boss. But at that moment, there was something different in his eyes, a mix of nervousness and guilt. "He's my younger brother, Kevin," David revealed, leaving Emily speechless. "We haven't spoken in nearly 30 years. He left for Japan when he was young and built a life there. He returned to the United States yesterday after all this time." Emily sank heavily into the chair across from David's desk. Pieces of a puzzle were forming in her mind, but she still couldn't see the full picture. "Why did he get so emotional when I spoke Japanese?" she asked. David hesitated. He stood up and went to a drawer he always kept locked. From it, he pulled out an old, yellowed folder. "Emily, there are things about your hiring that you don't know," he began, avoiding her gaze. "When you showed up here looking for a job, I didn't hire you by chance." Emily's heart pounded. All these years, she'd believed she got the job on her own merit, despite having no experience in the field. "What do you mean?" "Your mother, Grace Chen, worked for our family," David said, opening the folder to reveal old photos. "She was our housekeeper for 5 years, when Kevin and I still lived in our parents' home." Emily looked at the photos with trembling hands. There was her mother, younger, smiling beside a Japanese-American family she didn't recognize. Except for one detail, David's eyes were unmistakable, even decades younger. "My mother never told me she worked for you," she murmured, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet. "She left our house suddenly, 25 years ago," continued David. "She was pregnant and disappeared without any explanation. My father was furious, my mother inconsolable. Grace was like a daughter to them. Emily's childhood memories were hazy. Her mother always said her father had died before she was born, but never gave details. When Emily asked questions, Grace would change the subject or start crying. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. "My mother passed away 3 years ago," said Emily, her voice trembling. "She took all her secrets with her." "I know," David replied softly. "That's when I started searching for you more intensely. I hired detectives, combed through public records. When you showed up here, I knew immediately who you were." Emily felt betrayed and confused. Her entire life at the restaurant had been built on a lie. David had watched her from afar, knowing exactly who she was, while she lived in ignorance. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, fighting back tears. "Because I wasn't sure how you'd react, and because—" David paused for a long moment, as if the next words were the hardest of his life. "Because there's a chance I might be your father." Emily's world collapsed in that instant. She gripped the table to steady herself, feeling nauseous. Everything in her life had been a lie. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Your mother and I had a brief but intense relationship," David confessed. "My parents were against it because she worked for our family. When she disappeared while pregnant, I tried to find her, but she had vanished completely." The tears finally came. Emily cried for her mother, who had died carrying so many secrets. She cried for herself, for a lifetime of lies. And she cried for David, who might be her father and had lived all these years not knowing. "I need time to process this," she said, standing up. "Emily, wait," David pleaded. "There's more you need to know. Kevin returned to the United States because he's sick. Advanced stage cancer. He came looking for you." "What do you mean, looking for me?" "My brother never married, never had children. If you really are my daughter, you'll be the only heir to the Parker family. But more importantly, he wanted to meet the niece he never got to see grow up." Emily left the office in shock. She spent the rest of the day serving tables mechanically, her mind struggling to process the revelations. Her co-workers noticed something was wrong, but she couldn't bring herself to talk about it. That night, in her small apartment, Emily sifted through the few belongings her mother had left behind. At the bottom of a box, she found something she'd never noticed before, a sealed envelope with her name written in Japanese. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was a letter in Japanese, written in her mother's delicate handwriting. "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, it means I've passed on without finding the courage to tell you the truth. Your father is David Parker, a good man whom I loved deeply. I ran away because his family would never accept me as their daughter-in-law. It was better to raise you alone than to see you rejected for being mixed. Forgive me for the secrets, but it was the only way I knew to protect you. Love your father. He deserves to know the wonderful daughter you've become." Emily cried until she had no tears left. Her mother had sacrificed everything to shield her from a rejection that might never have happened. And now it was too late to talk, to understand, to forgive. The next day she returned to the restaurant determined to confront David. She found him in the office, staring melancholically out the window. "I found a letter from my mother," she said, handing him the paper. David read in silence, and when he finished, he was also crying. "She was wrong about my parents," he finally said. "They were devastated when she left. My mother cried for months, wondering where she went wrong for Grace to run away from her. Why would she think she wouldn't be accepted? Because at that time my grandmother was still alive. The family matriarch, very traditional. She made comments about mixed heritage, about maintaining the purity of the Japanese lineage. My mother tried to defend her, but Grace must have overheard those conversations." Emily began to understand her mother's fear. In a traditional Japanese-American family in the 90s, the social pressures were immense. "Where are your parents now?" she asked. "My father passed away 5 years ago. My mother, Grandma Parker, is 82 and still lives in the family home. Since Grace left, she's never hired another housekeeper. She says no one could make green tea like her." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Emily. Her paternal grandmother had spent years missing her mother, unaware she had a granddaughter living in the same city. "And Kevin, how did he find out about me?" "I told him last night after you left. I showed him photos of you I'd discreetly taken over these 2 years. He was shocked, but he said he always knew there was something special about you in the way you spoke Japanese." At that moment, as if summoned by their conversation, Kevin Parker entered the restaurant. He looked paler than the day before, but his eyes shone with determination. "Emily-chan," he said, using the affectionate Japanese suffix. "Can we talk?" She nodded, still processing that this man was her uncle. They sat at the same table where they'd met the day before. "First, I want to apologize for running off yesterday," Kevin began. "When you answered in Japanese, it was like hearing Grace's voice again. She had the same accent, the same intonation. Did you know my mother well? Grace was like an older sister to me. I was only 16 when she started working for our family. She taught me origami, told me old Japanese stories. When she disappeared, I was devastated too. Kevin paused to cough, and Emily noticed how frail he looked from his illness. There was a deep sadness in his eyes, as if he carried old regrets. "Why did you come back to the United States after all this time?" she asked. "Because I built a business empire in Japan, but I never built a family. When I found out about the cancer, I realized all my success meant nothing if I had no one to leave it to. I came back looking for Grace and you." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, back to the story. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an elderly woman leaning on a cane. Her hair was completely white, but she stood tall with a steady gaze. Emily immediately recognized the family resemblance in the woman's face. "Grandma," Kevin murmured, standing respectfully. Mrs. Parker examined Emily from head to toe with piercing eyes. She spoke a few words in Japanese to Kevin, who translated, "She wants to know if you're really Grace's daughter." "Yes, I'm Grace's daughter," Emily replied in Japanese. The old woman's reaction was instant. Her eyes filled with tears, and she covered her mouth with her hands as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Grace-chan," she whispered, using Emily's mother's name. Suddenly the woman stepped forward and cupped Emily's face in her trembling hands, studying every detail. "You have David's eyes but Grace's smile," she said in English, her accent thick. "All these years I wondered where my girl was, and now I find out she gave me a granddaughter." Emily was moved by her grandmother's warm reaction. All the stories about the traditional, prejudiced matriarch didn't seem to apply to the affectionate woman embracing her. "Grandma always considered me family," explained David, who had joined the group. "When Grace disappeared, she was inconsolable. She hired detectives, offered rewards, everything to bring her back." "But my mother thought you wouldn't accept her," said Emily, confused. Mrs. Parker's expression darkened. "That was my mother-in-law's fault," she explained. "Your great-grandmother was a bitter woman, stuck in the past. She made cruel comments about mixed heritage when she thought I wasn't listening. Grace must have heard them and felt rejected." The puzzle pieces finally fell into place. Emily's mother had run away because of the prejudices of someone who wasn't even part of the immediate family. "I should have stood up to that old woman more firmly," Grandma Parker continued. "But back then, I was young and unsure. I didn't have the courage to challenge her authority. And because of that, I lost my Grace and 25 years of my granddaughter's life." The family reunion was emotional, but Emily still wrestled with conflicting feelings. On one hand, she was happy to discover she had a family who loved her. On the other, she felt anger for the lost years, the lies, the unnecessary suffering her mother had endured. "I need time to process all this," she finally said. "Of course, dear," said Grandma. "But please, don't disappear like your mother did. We've already lost too much time." In the following days, Emily kept working at the restaurant, but now every interaction with David felt strange. How was she supposed to treat a man who had always been her boss, but now turned out to be her father? And how to handle Kevin's daily visits, clearly fighting against the time his illness allowed him. One afternoon, while serving tables, Emily overheard a heated argument in the office. She recognized David's voice and other men speaking in Japanese. "What are they arguing about?" she asked Kevin, who was drinking green tea at a nearby table. "Those are our other uncles," he explained with disdain. "They found out about you and are worried about the family inheritance." Emily's stomach twisted. She hadn't even thought about inheritance, but apparently other family members had. "They want a paternity test before accepting any claim from you," Kevin continued, "as if you were some opportunist after money." The humiliation was intense. Emily had always supported herself through her own work and never asked anyone for anything. The idea that they doubted her intentions was unbearable. "Maybe I should just take the test and settle their doubts," she said. "No," Kevin slammed his fist on the table. "You owe them nothing. David knows you're his daughter. I know you're my niece. The rest of the family can adjust." That night, as Emily was closing the restaurant, she found David sitting alone looking at old photos. "Are these yours?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Ours," he corrected. "This one is you at 3 months old." Emily stared in surprise at the photo of a baby in her mother's arms. How did David have this? Grace sent me a few photos over the first few years, he explained. I think she knew I was searching and wanted to give me that small comfort. Then the photos stopped coming. She never told me about this. Your mother carried so much guilt for running away, but she also loved me and wanted me to know you existed, even from afar. David showed more photos. Emily learning to walk, her first day of school, high school graduation. Your mother had documented her daughter's life and secretly shared it with your father. All these years you knew I existed? She asked, moved. I knew I had a daughter, but I didn't know where you were. The photos arrived with no return address. I kept each one like a treasure, imagining what you'd be like, what kind of person you were becoming. Emily finally understood why David had hired her immediately when she showed up looking for work. He had been waiting for her for years. Why didn't you tell me who you were from the first day? Because I wanted you to know me as a person before learning I was your father. I wanted to earn your respect and affection, not simply claim paternal rights I hadn't exercised. David's honesty touched Emily deeply. For 2 years, he had been a fair and considerate boss, always willing to help when she needed it. Now she understood that behind every kindness was a father's repressed love. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Over the weekend, Grandma Parker invited Emily to visit the family home. It was a traditional Japanese-style house in New York City's Chinatown, with a Zen garden and decor blending Eastern and American elements. This was the house where your mother worked, the grandmother explained, guiding her through the rooms. Her room was here in the annex. Emily entered the small room her mother had occupied for 5 years. It was exactly as Grace had left it, a futon folded in the corner, a low table for tea ceremonies, and a small bookshelf with Japanese books. I never had the heart to change anything, Grandma admitted. I always hoped she'd return. On the shelf, Emily found a diary in Japanese. She asked permission to read it and discovered her mother's feelings during those years, her growing love for David, her uncertainty about her place in the family, her fear of not being accepted. An entry dated just days before her mother disappeared revealed the inner conflict she faced. I've discovered I'm pregnant with David's child. I'm so happy, but also terrified. Great-grandmother made awful comments today about pure blood and family traditions. How can I raise a mixed-race child in this environment? Maybe it's better to leave and spare my daughter this rejection. Emily cried as she read her mother's anguish. Grace had sacrificed her own happiness to protect a daughter who hadn't even been born yet. Your mother was a very wise woman, but also very insecure, Grandma remarked, reading over Emily's shoulder. She overestimated the family's prejudices and underestimated our love for her. In the following days, Emily spent more time with her grandparents, learning about their traditions and family history. Grandma taught her the proper tea ceremony, traditional origami, and shared stories about Japanese immigration to the United States. Your mother learned all this too, the grandmother said proudly. She knew more about our culture than many Japanese Americans born here. Emily began to understand her own identity better. All her life, she had felt torn between 2 cultures without fully belonging to either. Now she realized this duality wasn't a weakness, but a richness. Kevin, whose health visibly worsened each day, grew especially close to Emily. He told her about modern Japan, the businesses he'd built, but mostly about the loneliness of a life dedicated only to work. You give me hope that our family will continue, he said one afternoon, watching Emily prepare green tea exactly as Grandma had taught her. Not just through blood, but through values and traditions passed down with love. The pressure from other relatives regarding the paternity test was growing. Some distant uncles even came to the restaurant demanding proof, insinuating that Emily was an opportunist. Enough, David finally exploded. Emily is my daughter, and you will respect her or you're not welcome here. David, be reasonable, argued one of the uncles. How can we accept an heiress without proof? The family has considerable assets. What assets? Emily asked, genuinely confused. I work here as a waitress. What inheritance are you talking about? It was then that she discovered a truth no one had mentioned. The Parker family owned a chain of Japanese restaurants across the United States, real estate properties, and significant investments. David had kept a low profile, but he was substantially wealthy. "This changes nothing for me," Emily said firmly. "I didn't come here for money. I came looking for a job and found a family." "Exactly what an opportunist would say," muttered one of the uncles. Kevin, who had remained silent until then, stood up with difficulty and faced his brother. "If you can't see that Emily has Grace's heart and David's character, then you don't deserve to be called family," he said in a weak but determined voice. "She could have demanded recognition, could have sued for child support for the lost years. Instead, she worked honestly and only found out who we were by chance." The silence that followed was awkward. The uncles realized their suspicions were unfounded and left sheepishly. That night, Emily talked at length with David about the future. "I don't want anything from the family inheritance," she said. "I just want to get to know my relatives better and honor my mother's memory." "The inheritance isn't just money, Emily," David explained. "It's responsibility. It's continuing the values we've built. One day, someone will need to take care of Grandma, carry on the family business, and keep our traditions alive." Emily had never considered this perspective. She had always lived thinking only of herself and her survival. The idea of being part of something bigger, of having family responsibilities, was both frightening and comforting. In the following weeks, Kevin's health deteriorated rapidly. He was hospitalized, and the whole family gathered at the hospital. It was during one of these vigils that Emily had a revealing conversation with an elderly nurse. "Mr. Kevin talks about you a lot," the nurse remarked. "He says you're the most important thing that ever happened to him." "We barely knew each other," Emily replied, moved. "Sometimes love doesn't need time to form," the nurse philosophized, "especially family love. It's as if he'd been waiting for you his whole life." Kevin spent his last days telling Emily stories about Japan, teaching her Japanese words she didn't know, and most of all, asking for forgiveness for the years the family had lost due to pride and misunderstandings. "Promise me you won't let our family fall apart again?" he asked from his hospital bed. "I promise, Uncle," Emily replied, holding his frail hand. "And promise you'll take care of Grandma when she needs it?" "I promise. And that you'll help David continue honoring the traditions Grace loved so much?" "I promise all of it." Kevin smiled and closed his eyes for the last time, passing peacefully, knowing he had found the niece he'd been searching for. The funeral was held according to Japanese traditions, attended by the entire Japanese-American community of New York City. Emily learned about rituals her mother had taught her in fragments, but that now made complete sense. During the ceremony, something unexpected happened. Several elderly members of the community approached Emily. "You look so much like Grace," one woman said. "She used to attend our Japanese flower arranging study group." "Japanese flower arranging?" asked Emily, surprised. "The art of Japanese flower arranging," the lady explained. "Your mother was very talented. She even taught classes for other women in the community." Emily discovered that her mother had maintained connections with Japanese culture even after fleeing the Parker household. There were classes in Japanese flower arranging, participation in traditional festivals, and even a support group for single Japanese-American mothers. "Why did she never tell me about these activities?" Emily asked. "Because she was afraid you'd ask questions about your father," another lady explained. "Grace told us the story. She wanted you to take pride in your Japanese roots, but didn't want to explain why you weren't part of the Parker family." These revelations showed Emily that her mother had lived with a constant dilemma. She wanted to preserve the culture for her daughter, but couldn't fully reveal their origins without explaining the abandonment by her father's family. In the months following Kevin's departure, Emily grew even closer to the family. Grandma insisted she move into the main house, arguing she was too lonely in the annex where Grace had lived. "This isn't about inheritance or money," her grandmother explained. "It's about not wasting any more precious time. We've already missed 25 years of your life. I don't want to lose another day." Emily agreed to the move, but kept her job at the restaurant. However, her role was gradually changing. David began teaching her about administration, suppliers, and staff management. "If you're going to be part of this family, "You need to understand how our business works," he said. "Not because you have to work here forever, but because one day you might want to continue the legacy we've built." The father-daughter relationship developed naturally, without forcing an intimacy that didn't yet exist, but building genuine trust and affection. David was patient with Emily's questions and understanding of her need for time to process so many changes. One day, while organizing old photos in the office, Emily found an album she hadn't seen before. "What's this?" she asked. David hesitated before answering. "These are photos I had taken of you over the years," he admitted, embarrassed. "I hired detectives not just to find you, but to document your life from afar." Emily flipped through the album in awe. There were pictures of her at school, graduation, her first job, walking down the street, always taken from a distance. Her father had followed every stage of her life, even if he couldn't be part of it. "This is stalking?" she asked, unsure whether to be touched or disturbed. "Maybe," David admitted. "But it was the only way I could feel close to you. Every photo was a small victory, proof that you were okay, growing up, becoming an admirable woman." His obsessive dedication to tracking her life from afar was both unsettling and deeply moving. Emily realized her father had suffered just as much as her mother during all those years apart. "There's something else you should know," David said, showing old receipts. "All these years your mother sent money anonymously to invest in your name. She never wanted you to know, but she was financially contributing to the restaurant." "What do you mean?" "Grace worked in several households, took on extra sewing jobs, sold homemade food. Every extra dollar she earned, she sent here with specific instructions. Invest it under Emily Chen's name for the future." Emily was shocked. Her mother had lived a life of financial sacrifice to ensure her daughter had a secure future, even if she couldn't explain why. "Is that why you hired me right away?" she asked. "I hired you because you were my daughter," David said, "but also because technically you were already an investor in the restaurant." Grace had accumulated a significant stake in the business over the years. The irony of the situation was astonishing. Emily had worked as a waitress in a business that partly belonged to her, unaware of it. Her mother had found a way to include her in the Parker family indirectly, through silent financial contributions. During a family dinner, Grandma revealed more details about the relationship between David and Grace. "They were deeply in love," Grandma shared. "David even proposed, but Grace was afraid of her great-grandmother's reaction. At the time, I didn't know about the pregnancy. Otherwise, I would have insisted they stay together." "Did my father really want to marry her?" Emily asked. "He bought an engagement ring," Grandma revealed, getting up to retrieve something from a drawer. "I've kept it all these years, waiting for the right moment to return it." The ring was simple yet elegant, with a pearl at the center surrounded by small diamonds. Emily held it reverently, imagining how different things might have been if her mother had found the courage to accept the proposal. "Did he ever marry after that?" she asked. "Never," Grandma replied sadly. "David had a few relationships over the years, but he could never fully commit. I think part of him always hoped Grace would come back." David's devotion to her mother's memory moved Emily deeply. For 25 years, he had remained emotionally tied to a woman who had left him, always hoping for a reunion that never came. The revelations about her parents' past made Emily reflect on her own choices. At 24, she had avoided serious relationships, always afraid of being abandoned like her mother had been. Now she understood that her mother hadn't been abandoned. She had left out of fear and insecurity. An unexpected event disrupted the peace the family had been gradually rebuilding. A group of investors offered a substantial sum to buy the Parker restaurant chain. "It's an excellent opportunity," the potential buyers argued. "You could retire comfortably and wouldn't have to worry about the day-to-day management." David was tempted. At 58, he was starting to feel the weight of business responsibilities, but Emily surprised everyone with a different proposal. "What if, instead of selling, we modernized?" she suggested. "We could create a concept that honors Japanese traditions but appeals to younger generations." "Do you have any experience in business management?" asked one skeptical uncle. "No," Emily admitted, "but I've spent 2 decades observing how customers react to our dishes. their preferences, what they miss. And most importantly, my heart is split between two cultures, which gives me a unique perspective. David was intrigued by his daughter's idea. What do you have in mind? A space that's both a traditional restaurant and a cultural center, Emily explained. We could offer Japanese cooking classes, tea ceremonies, origami, Japanese flower arranging. Turn our family tradition into a bridge between the Japanese American and broader communities. The idea was ambitious and risky. It would mean investing money in renovations and changes instead of profiting from a guaranteed sale. It's very risky, Grandma murmured, but there was admiration in her voice. But it's exactly the kind of idea Grace would have proposed. For weeks, the family debated the proposal. Some relatives favored selling, while others supported Emily's innovative vision. The division created tensions that hadn't existed since her arrival. Maybe I'm being too ambitious, Emily told David one night after a particularly tense family meeting. Maybe you should just sell and enjoy retirement. No, David replied firmly. Your idea is brilliant. Note: the translation strictly follows the provided cultural mappings, maintains the original structure and tone, and adapts idiomatic expressions naturally while preserving the essence of the story. I'm proud to have a daughter who thinks about legacy, not just immediate profit. But the decision has to be agreed upon by all the family partners. The solution came from an unexpected source. During a memorial ceremony for Kevin, several members of the Japanese American community approached the family. We heard about Emily's idea for the cultural center, said the leader of the local Japanese American Association. The community has been looking for a suitable place for cultural activities. If you move forward with this project, you'll have our full support. The endorsement from the Japanese American community shifted the family dynamics. The skeptical uncles realized Emily's proposal wasn't just an inexperienced young woman's dream, but a real need that could benefit the entire community. All right, said the most resistant uncle, let's try it. But if the project fails, we go back to the negotiating table with the buyers. Emily knew she had only one chance to prove her vision was viable. She began working tirelessly on the business plan, studying cultural management, researching similar centers in other cities, and consulting experts in family business revitalization. Grandma became her greatest ally in this process. When I was young, women had no say in family decisions, her grandmother confessed. But you remind me that tradition and innovation can walk hand in hand. Grace would be so proud to see the strong woman you've become. The renovations began slowly. Part of the restaurant was redesigned to include a classroom, a space for tea ceremonies, and a small gallery for Japanese American art exhibitions. During the construction, Emily found a letter hidden behind an old piece of furniture. It was from her mother, addressed to David, but apparently never sent. My dear David, every day I spend away from you is torture. Emily grows up with your eyes, your smile, your kindness. I wish I could come back, but I'm afraid the family won't accept us. Maybe one day you'll meet our daughter and forgive my cowardice. The letter was dated 10 years ago, revealing her mother's suffering had lasted much longer than Emily ever imagined. She almost came back several times, David explained, reading the letter with tears in his eyes. I always felt she was close, but I could never find her. Why didn't she send this letter? Because her fear was stronger than her desire to return. Grace carried a guilt we never knew existed. The discovery of the letter motivated Emily even more to make the cultural center project work. It was as if she were honoring not just her mother's memory, but also the lost love between her parents. The day of the grand reopening of the Restaurant Cultural Center arrived, filled with anticipation and nerves. The entire Japanese American community in New York City was invited, along with local officials and press representatives. Emily had prepared a moving speech about the importance of preserving traditions while adapting to modern times. But when the moment came, her words flowed straight from the heart. This place isn't just a restaurant or a cultural center, she said, her voice trembling. It's a symbol of reconciliation. My mother ran away from here out of fear, but today I return with love. She believed she wouldn't be accepted for being different, but I've learned that our differences are our strength. The event was an absolute success. The cooking classes filled up, the tea ceremony drew curious visitors of all ages, and the restaurant began attracting customers who came not just for the food, but for the full cultural experience. But the most emotional moment came 3 months after the opening. An elderly woman leaning on a cane walked into the restaurant and went straight to Emily. "Are you Grace's daughter?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Emily replied, intrigued. "I'm Mrs. Williams, a friend of your mother's from the Japanese flower arranging group. She told me so much about you." The woman handed Emily a carefully wrapped box. "Grace asked me to give this to you when the time was right. I believe that time is now." Inside the box were origami arrangements her mother had made over the years, each one representing one of Emily's birthdays, 24 delicate paper flowers, crafted with love by a mother who had watched her daughter grow from afar. Emily cried as she held those silent gifts. Her mother had found creative ways to show maternal love, even in her physical absence. "There's something else," Mrs. Williams said, pulling an envelope from her bag. "Grace wrote this shortly before she passed. She asked me to give it to you if you ever reunited with the Parker family." Her mother's final letter was the hardest to read. "My dearest daughter, if you're reading this, it means you found your way back home. Forgive me for running away. Forgive me for denying you the right to know your father and your family. My fear was greater than my love, and for that, I carried guilt until my last days. But now you can mend what I broke. You can be the bridge between two worlds I never had the courage to unite. Be happy, my girl. Be proud of who you are, and love your family as I always loved you, even from a distance." The forgiveness Emily didn't know she needed to give finally came in that moment. Her mother had done the best she could with the circumstances she faced, and now it was Emily's responsibility to build the future they had both dreamed of. In the months that followed, the Cultural Center became a cornerstone for preserving Japanese traditions in New York City. Emily gradually took on more responsibilities in managing it, always with David's support and guidance. The bond between father and daughter grew into something deep and genuine. They developed their own rituals, monthly lunches, just the two of them, where they discussed business and personal life, morning walks through the garden of the traditional house, and most of all, cooking sessions where David taught her recipes he had learned from his own mother. "You know what amazes me most about you," David said during one of these cooking sessions. "You have Grace's determination and the patience I never had. It's a powerful combination. And you have the generosity my mother always said set you apart from other men," Emily replied. "Now I understand why she could never forget you." Grandma, at 82, became Emily's biggest advocate in the family. She often said her granddaughter was exactly what the family needed to renew itself without losing its roots. "Grace gave us the greatest gift she could," Grandma mused. "Our daughter who honors the past but isn't afraid of the future." A year after the Cultural Center opened, Emily received a marriage proposal from a young architect who attended her origami classes. He was a kind man from an American family who admired her dedication to preserving culture. "I'm happy for you," David said when he heard about the engagement, "but I confess I'm a little jealous. I'm sharing my daughter for the first time in 25 years. "You'll never lose me," Emily assured him. "This family, this place, this story we've built together, it's forever." The wedding was held at the Cultural Center itself, in a ceremony blending Japanese and American traditions. Grandma cried with emotion, seeing her granddaughter dressed in the kimono that had belonged to her great-grandmother, finally worn for a happy celebration in the family. During the reception, David gave a speech that moved everyone present. "2 years ago, I was a lonely man living in the past. Today, I'm the proud father of an extraordinary woman, a soon-to-be grandfather, and I have a united family looking to the future with hope. Grace, wherever you are, thank you for raising our girl with so much love and wisdom." The couple's honeymoon was special, a trip to Japan to explore the maternal roots of Emily. David insisted on paying for the trip, saying it was a wedding gift and also a way for Emily to fully connect with her heritage. In Japan, Emily visited the hometown of the Parkers, met distant relatives who still lived there, and learned traditional cooking techniques that she brought back to enrich the restaurant's menu. When they returned to the United States, Emily was pregnant. The news filled the whole family with joy, especially Grandma, who would finally have a great-grandchild to spoil. "Will you teach the baby Japanese from an early age?" the grandmother asked eagerly. "Of course," Emily replied. "But I'll also teach them Portuguese, English, and most importantly, the story of our family. This child will grow up knowing they belong to two worlds and must honor both." During the pregnancy, Emily began writing a book about her family's history, from the immigration of her Japanese great-grandparents to her own reconciliation with her roots. She wanted to leave a record for future generations of how love can overcome fears and prejudices. The book became a family project. David contributed details about the family's business history, Grandma provided traditional recipes and old legends, and even the uncles who had initially resisted Emily's presence now enthusiastically collaborated. "This book will be our legacy," Emily said, stroking her growing belly, "so no child in our family grows up without knowing their roots, like I did." The birth of Noah Parker Miller, combining both parents' surnames, was celebrated in grand style. The boy was born with the dark eyes of the Parkers and the brown hair of his American father. When Emily held her son for the first time, she remembered all the hardships she had faced to get there. The baby represented not just a new life, but the continuation of a family story that had almost been lost forever. "Look, Noah," she whispered to the newborn, "you are the grandson of a brave woman who sacrificed everything for love, the son of a waitress who discovered she was the heir to a centuries-old tradition, and the great-grandson of grandparents who learned that love is greater than pride." David, holding his grandson for the first time, wept openly. "Grace should be here to see this," he murmured. "She is," Emily replied, touching her chest. "She's in every value she taught me, in every Japanese word I learned from her, in every moment of courage I inherited from her." The cultural center thrived beyond all expectations. It became a model for similar initiatives in the United States, and Emily began giving talks on cultural preservation and family reconciliation. But professional success wasn't what mattered most to her. What she truly valued were the family Sundays, when 4 generations gathered in the traditional home. Grandma telling old stories, David teaching his grandson origami, her cooking the recipes she'd learned from her mother and grandmother, and her husband documenting everything in photographs. "You know what I've learned from all this?" Emily said during one of those family Sundays. "Sometimes fate separates us from the people we love, but if the love is true, it always finds a way back." 5 years after that first encounter in the restaurant, when a mysterious customer had spoken Japanese and changed her life forever, Emily reflected on all the twists and turns that had brought her there. She was no longer just a waitress looking for a job. She was a daughter, a wife, a mother, a businesswoman, and a guardian of family traditions. But most of all, it was the bridge that connected 2 generations separated by fear and reconciled a family that pride had nearly destroyed. When Noah turned 3 and spoke his first words in Japanese, Grandma declared that her life's mission was complete. "Now I can go in peace," said the great-grandmother. "Our family is whole again. Our traditions are safe, and love has overcome every obstacle." "Grandma will live many more years," Emily protested. "Noah needs to grow up hearing your stories." "He'll grow up hearing your stories about my stories," the wise elder corrected. "That's how traditions endure, through generations who understand the value of the past and the importance of the future." One September evening, as Emily was closing the restaurant, she found a young waitress crying in the bathroom. The girl had just discovered she was pregnant and was afraid to tell her traditional family. "How did you find the courage to face a conservative Japanese-American family?" the girl asked, knowing Emily's story. "I didn't," Emily admitted. "My mother ran away out of fear, and I only learned my family loved me because fate brought us back together by chance. But if I could give you one piece of advice, it would be talk. The fear in our heads is always worse than the reality we face." Emily helped the girl speak to her parents and discovered that, just like in her own family, love was stronger than imagined prejudice. "Maybe this is my calling," she thought. Helping others find the courage to face their family fears. Inspired, Emily created a support group at the Cultural Center for young people in conflict with their families over cultural issues. The group became a success, helping dozens of families reconcile. "You're turning our personal pain into healing for others," David observed proudly. "That's what great leaders do." "I'm not a great leader," Emily protested. "I'm just a daughter who learned the value of family and wants to share that blessing." But the Japanese-American community in New York City disagreed with her humility. Emily was chosen to lead the Japanese-American Cultural Association, a position she accepted with humility and responsibility. In her inauguration speech, she spoke about her personal journey and how it reflected the challenges of many immigrant families. "We are the product of two cultures, and that isn't a weakness. It's our greatest strength. We can be proud Americans with Japanese roots and proud Japanese Americans embracing our American identity. Our heritage doesn't have to be a choice, it can be a celebration." 10 years after that first encounter in the restaurant, Emily had become one of the most prominent leaders in the Japanese-American community. But when asked about her greatest success, she always answered, "My greatest success was learning to forgive. Forgiving my mother for running away, forgiving my father for not searching harder, forgiving my family for past prejudices, and most of all, forgiving myself for living so long in anger." One afternoon, while sorting through Grandma's belongings after her peaceful passing at 89, Emily found one last surprise, a photo album the great-grandmother had secretly put together. The pictures showed moments from Emily's life she didn't even know had been captured: her serving tables at the restaurant, chatting with customers, smiling as she worked. The great-grandmother had documented her professional life with the same care David had documented her childhood. On the last page of the album was a letter: "To my dear great-granddaughter Emily, you brought back the joy our family lost when Grace left. Thank you for teaching us that love is stronger than pride, and that family is what we build together, not just what we inherit by blood." Emily closed the photo album, moved. Her great-grandmother had understood from the start that she wasn't just a lost granddaughter who had returned, but the person the family needed to heal and renew itself. Now at 34, Emily manages a thriving network of cultural centers that has expanded to other cities in the United States. Noah, now 10, is fluent in Japanese and English, plays taiko, traditional Japanese drum, loves soccer, and enjoys telling his school friends about his multicultural family. "Mom, when I grow up, I want to take care of our family just like you do," he said one afternoon as he helped Emily prepare rice cakes for the fall festival. "You'll do so much more than that," she replied, hugging her son. "You'll create your own story, honoring the past but building the future you dream of." David, now 68, officially retired, but still visits the restaurant every day. He says he can't stay away from the place where he reunited with his daughter and built the family he'd always dreamed of having. "Do you know the most amazing part of this whole story?" he often asks Emily. "What?" "That it all started with a simple request in Japanese, a phrase that might have gone unnoticed if you hadn't answered in the same language. Destiny sometimes reveals itself in the smallest details." Emily agrees. If she hadn't learned Japanese from her mother, if she hadn't automatically responded to that customer, if she hadn't worked at that specific restaurant, none of this would have happened. "Maybe that's why my mother insisted on teaching me Japanese," she reflects. "Deep down, she knew I'd need it one day to find my way back home." The Parker family's story has become legendary in New York City's Japanese-American community. It's told at weddings, graduations, and whenever someone needs hope to overcome family conflicts. But to Emily, it isn't a legend. It's simply proof that true love never dies. It just waits for the right moment to reveal itself. And that sometimes, a single conversation in a foreign language can change the fate of generations. The end. And what about you, dear listener? What did you think of this journey of reunion and forgiveness? Have you ever experienced something similar in your family, where misunderstandings separated loved ones? Share your own stories of family reconciliation in the comments, and don't forget to like if this story touched your heart. And be sure to subscribe so you won't miss other heartfelt stories like this one.